So here's some tips in keeping your kayak going in a straight line if you're new to paddling. Now this question comes up a lot. Newer paddlers often reach out and say, hey, what are some tips for me to keep my kayak going in a straight line? Now later in the video, I'll discuss a little bit why a longer kayak will make things a little easier in keeping a straight line. But that doesn't mean that a short kayak can't go in a straight line. With good technique, you should be able to paddle any kayak in a pretty straight line. So here's a couple of tips and things that I usually see when I'm guiding or when I'm working with new paddlers. The first one that comes up a lot is hand positioning. When you're just getting into paddling, you might not know exactly where to put your hands on the paddle. And then throughout the day, your hands might move around on the paddles, and that might make it so that you have more of the paddle out on one side than the other. That will not help you in going in a straight line. So a good rule to follow, and it's okay to do this several times throughout the day, and as you get more comfortable with it, you'll have to do it less and less until eventually your hands will just get used to going to their positions automatically. You'll just be able to feel it out. But at first, it's okay to every so often take the paddle, put it up over your head, let your arms go into a comfortable position where your elbows are making a right angle, and then when you take the paddle down, make sure there's the same amount of paddle to either side. This should provide you with a comfortable hand position and will create a strong paddler box in front of you. Another thing I often see with new paddlers is they might not be matching the same kind of strokes on both sides, and that's okay. That's just because they're just getting started. But for example, they might be doing a forward stroke with one paddle, but then their left hand might be doing a sweep stroke. Now, it's good to go back and understand the difference between a forward stroke and a turning stroke, a sweep stroke. So a forward stroke is trying to get the most forward momentum, the most forward power out of getting the blade in the water, and then get as much forward force out of that stroke. A sweep stroke usually keeps the paddle very close to the surface of the water. It goes in an arc out and around and away from the kayak, and that's a stroke that's used to turn the kayak. So keep an eye on your blades, and if you're trying to go in a straight line, try to match your stroke on both sides. Another thing that comes up a lot, which is actually very funny, is sometimes I'll see someone paddling and I see that they're always veering off to one side. And if none of the other usual things that will cause a kayak to turn are present, a lot of times newer paddlers, they'll use their hands, they'll use their arms, and that dominant hand will probably put in more strength into each stroke, meaning the kayak will probably turn away from that particular side. One thing that's very important to talk about is as you progress, your forward stroke should change from using your hands and using your arms to using your core and using your legs. The rest of the body, the bigger muscle groups, are the ones that should be providing all of that force for your forward stroke. Your arms and your hands simply going to be transferring all of that from your body to the paddle. Don't get me wrong, we all start there. Most new paddlers, the first time they get on the water, they'll be paddling with their arms, and that's okay. But as you progress, look to improve that forward stroke. Another thing that's interesting to see is you should try to anticipate what the kayak is doing. And what I mean is, we don't have breaks. We don't have immediate actions and responses in the water. So I often see new paddlers when they're going, and I can see that the boat is starting to turn in a certain direction, and they don't really notice it until it's a little too late. And then they put in lots of corrective strokes on the other side, and by the time they realize that they overcorrected, now the kayak is going in the opposite direction again. So the idea is to simply anticipate what you're trying to do so that you correct ahead of time. The more practice you have, the more you'll be able to anticipate this, and the easier it's going to be. So for example, if you're matching your strokes, a stroke you put in now might actually show you what it's going to be doing in a couple of strokes later on. If you add 2, 3, 4 corrected strokes on one side, all of a sudden, a couple of seconds later, you'll see the boat reacting. So anticipate what the boat is doing, and as you progress and as you get better, you're gonna get better at doing that as well. And the last thing to mention is that longer kayaks will just inherently, if they have a longer water line, will just track better. That means the longer the water line, the better the kayak will usually track. So a 10-foot kayak will probably want to turn side to side a bit more than, let's say, a 17 or 18 footer. But With proper technique, even the shortest of kayaks can be kept going in a pretty straight line. You can look at some whitewater paddlers, tiny playboats. They can keep them going straight because they've gotten to a point that they can match each stroke to each side and then keep it going in a straight line. I think the main thing is to try to watch to see how much of your power goes actually into going forward, and then trying to see if you can match left and right, because once you have that kind of down, muscle memory will eventually take over and just keep you going in a straight line without you thinking about it. Now, all of these tips mostly apply when conditions are calm and there's no wind. If you want to keep a kayak going straight when there's high winds or when there's waves, that's a different story, and we can talk about that in a different video. So I hope that was helpful. Please subscribe if you like. I'm always trying to put these videos down. If you have any comments or you want to ask anything further or you want to add anything as you develop your abilities in a forward stroke, please comment below. As always, look for more Kayak Hipster. Thank you for watching. See you next time.